Hi, third grade. Detectives in Togas, Chapter 9, Wet Clothes and Empty Money Box. Vinicius, who had been so reasonable, was angry once more. "Bring that Rufus to me at once," he growled. "I'll talk to him." He thanked Scribonus for his professional service, took Claudia by the hand, and returned to the house. Scribonus handed the writing tablet to Julius and strolled off. The boys angrily watched him go. He would mess things up for us," Publius said. "So Rufus lied after all," Mucius murmured. "Yet I would have sworn he was telling the truth." "What's the use now?" Julius said. "The die is cast and Scribonus has ruined our case. It looks bad for Rufus." "He can still run away," Flavius said. "It's too late for that now," Mucius said, "and he doesn't want to go anyway. We'd better go get him." This time they were not in such a great hurry. Their footsteps lagged, and it took them nearly 15 minutes to reach Pretonius's house. The old white-bearded slave looked pale and troubled as he opened the door for them. "The gods be thanked you've come," he exclaimed. "My mistress has asked about you several times. Go in quickly. Something terrible has happened." Each of the boys felt a sinking sensation in the pit of his stomach. They were so flustered that they forgot to remove their sandals. They made for the main hall and hesitated uneasily at the entrance. Rays of sunlight fell through the roof opening upon the household altar in the corner, which was adorned with early spring flowers. A cat lay asleep on the couch. The first impression was one of peace and harmony. But then they saw Rufus's mother, Livia, sitting motionless in an armchair close to the wall from which her husband's weapon collection hung. She was in tears, and her favorite slave girls stood around her in dismay. When Livia caught sight of the boys, she sprang to her feet and came to them. "Rufus has been arrested," she said, struggling to steady her voice. The boys were speechless with horror. "You must help me," Livia pleaded. "You're all his friends, aren't you? You know he has done nothing bad. They say he's guilty of desecrating a temple. I cannot believe that. My son is no hoodlum." About half an hour ago, an armed officer and 2 soldiers came to take him to prison. Rufus was in his room, but he must have heard us talking about him because he came out wrapped only in his blanket and asked, "What's the matter, mother?" The officer put a hand on his shoulder and said, "You have insulted our emperor. You are under arrest." Rufus wrenched away and came running to me, crying, "I swear I did not do it, mother." He was as white as this tunic of mine. He wanted to say more, but the officer shouted at him to be quiet and even threatened him with his sword. They led him away just as he was, without even giving him a chance to dress. I was nearly out of my mind. I would have run after them, but my girls held me back for fear I would be arrested too. "My poor boy," she sobbed. "It can't be true. It can't be." The boys looked down on the floor in embarrassment. At last Mucius murmured, "We did not believe it either." Livia gave him a look of gratitude. "They tell me that you were here earlier, shortly before Rufus was arrested. Why was Rufus not in school? What has been going on?" Mucius told her the story with the other boys, filling in his omissions. Livia listened more and more astonished. "Rufus behaved very foolishly in school," she said sadly, "but Caius also did wrong. He also knows how much Rufus thinks of his father. Ever since the news of this unfortunate battle arrived, Rufus has been a changed boy. He is upset about his father, so that his anger at Caius was only natural. But angry or not, he is still not the kind of boy to desecrate a temple. There are plenty of other walls to write on in Minerva Square." There is one point I do not understand," Livia said. "You told me that senator wants to see Rufus. The senator Vinicius already called on the prefect of the city, or has he not?" "No," Mucius said proudly. "We stopped him from doing that." "And yet somebody must have accused Rufus," Livia said. "Do you see?" Here was a startling thought. If the senator had not yet filed charges against Rufus, who was responsible for the arrest? We're the only ones who know it is Rufus's handwriting, Julius said thoughtfully. I mean, just us, and the senator, and Claudia, and Caius, and Scribonus, Mucius said. But no, Rufus was already arrested by the time Scribonus heard the story. Perhaps Caius denounced him, Publius suggested. Impossible, the others exclaimed. Why not, Publius said. Caius was pretty mad. That's silly, Julius pointed out. Caius knew his father was going to file charges against Rufus. Even supposing he wanted Rufus punished, he couldn't have planned it any better. His father, the famous senator, going to the prefect personally. Besides, the prefect would never arrest someone just on Caius's say-so. This last point convinced the others. Perhaps it was Vinicius' secretary or old Herodotus, Caius's tutor, Flavius said. They also knew about Rufus. Julius had an answer for that too. They are slaves, he pointed out, and slaves cannot bear witness against a Roman citizen. Besides, they would never have dared to act without their master's knowledge. But it must have been someone, Mucius exclaimed, baffled. Simple enough. Someone saw him doing it, Publius said calmly. Saw him doing it? Julius asked, desperately making signs to Publius to keep quiet. But Publius did not understand. Someone saw Rufus writing Caius Isidumble on the temple wall. Livia looked at them in fright. So you do believe that Rufus is guilty? She asked anxiously. Publius looked down at the floor, and the other boys also avoided meeting Livia's eyes. You cannot believe that, Livia said firmly. My son swore that he did not do it, and he's never lied to me. But her confidence was wavering, for she turned to one of her slave girls and asked, Why did Rufus come home late last night? I do not know, the girl said, but Rompus must know, mistress. Did Rompus bring Rufus home from school last night? Livia asked the boys. Rufus had already left, Mucius said. Rompus hurried home, hoping to meet Rufus on the way. I have not spoken to Rompus on this, Livia said. Unfortunately, he is not here now. I was unwell this morning, and Rompus was sent to the doctor to fetch healing herbs for me. The doctor lives on the other side of the Tiber River, so that Rompus will not be back for 3 hours at least. We can only wait for him. Perhaps you will be kind enough to come back later. I need your help. I myself can do little about this. Of course, I have already sent an express courier to my husband, but the man will take at least 5 days to reach Gaul, assuming that he can find enough changes of horses along the way. 10 days there and 10 back at best. And meanwhile, what terrible things might happen. We must find a real culprit as soon as possible. We must find the real culprit as soon as possible, and you can help me. You won't desert Rufus, will you? The boys assented heartily, but they were secretly wondering in what way they could help Livia, for by now they were almost certain that Rufus was guilty. Livia, however, clung to the last hope. Rufus could not have come home late last night, she said. Otherwise, Rompus would have told me. The boys did not understand. You told me that the desecration of the temple could have taken place only between the 5th and the 6th hours of the night, didn't you? She asked. Yes, Julius said. The policemen swore that they saw nothing before the 5th hour, and by the time we discovered the writing in the morning, the paint was already dry, which means it had to have been on the wall not much later than the 5th hour of the night. That would mean that Rufus would have had to leave the house last night, Livia continued, and that is impossible. The door is locked and well guarded. He could not crawl through the windows because they are too small, and the garden wall is too high to climb over. Once again, the boys were taken aback. From their own experience, they knew there was no chance of getting out of their own houses unnoticed late at night. Perhaps Rompus secretly let him out, Julius suggested. No, Livia said firmly. That is out of the question. I trust Rompus completely. He is utterly loyal to us, and we could not have a better tutor for Rufus. Rompus is more of a member of the family than a slave. My husband brought him back from Macedonia when he was still a boy, and we have raised him as if he were our own son. In fact, we intended to give him his freedom soon, and he will then be able to choose whether to stay with us or open a small shop somewhere in town. She sighed. I suppose it is better for you all to go home now. There's nothing we can do at the moment. We must wait to hear from what Rompus has to say. We left our school things in Rufus's room. May we get them, Julius asked. Livia nodded. The boys hurried to Rufus's room, followed by Livia, who held the curtain aside for them so they would have more light. The boys picked up their stuff and started to leave, but Mucius suddenly remembered his lantern, which Rufus had taken by mistake the night before. He looked around for it. Rufus' room was furnished with Spartan simplicity. Along one wall stood the bed, over which hung a portrait of Rufus's father in full general's uniform. Along the other wall was a small table, a hassock, and a shelf for school books and toys. He had no wardrobe. His clothes hung from big nails. What are you looking for? Julius asked. My lantern, Mucius said. Rufus took it with him last night by mistake. It was an expensive lantern, and it has my name engraved on it. My family will make a fuss if they notice I don't have it. It ought to be around, Antonia said, peering about the room. What is it? Livia asked, coming in. I'm looking for my lantern, Mucius said, flushing. I lent it to Rufus, and I'd like to have it back. It must be among his things on the shelf, Livia said. Mucius rummaged, but found nothing on the shelf except Rufus's books and writing materials. 11 marbles, a top, several broken wooden soldiers, a small knife, a fragment of Alexandrian glass, and a money box for savings. Publius took the money box from his hand and shook it curiously. It's empty, he said, replacing it on the shelf. Meanwhile, Antonius had crawled under the bed. He emerged with a bundle of clothing. This is all I could find, he said in disappointment. But Livia was startled. It's most unlike Rufus to hide things under his bed, she said. He is usually so orderly. She took the clothes from Antonius and promptly exclaimed, Why, these clothes are soaking wet. She held them up to show the boys. The clothes looked as though they had just been taken out of a full tub of water. She had only to press them for fat drops to splatter down upon the stone floor. Why should they be wet? Livia said in wonderment. At this moment, a slave girl came rushing into the room. Rompus is already back, mistress, she said breathlessly. Already? Livia asked. Then he could not have gone to the doctor. No, mistress, the girl said. He turned back to bring you important news. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Remember to write in your journal 3 good sentences. Bye.